Welcome to the very first solo episode of Rebel Mom Boss. My name's Robyn Flynn, and if you've been following along, you already know what this podcast is all about. So pull up a coffee if you're listening in the morning, pour yourself a glass of wine if you're listening at night, or get yourself a mocktail if you don't drink. Whatever it is, get yourself something nice, something you can enjoy, and let's talk about daycare. This is a very hot topic that I am seeing people discuss online. Obviously, with the rise in this whole trad wife content on social media, there's a conversation about whether or not women should be staying home after they have kids. Now, obviously, this conversation is dripping with sexism because it's always centered around whether or not women should be staying home with their kids and not including men in that conversation. If the conversation was about whether it's a good idea to have a parent who stays home with the child, perhaps I could get on board with this discussion. But centering it around moms should be staying home with their kids, I don't know how moms can go back to work. I hear is that I don't. The most common thing I hear is that I don't know how you can let somebody else raise your child. That one drives me absolutely bonkers because I don't believe that having a child in daycare means that somebody else is raising your child. I mean, how many hours are your children spending in daycare in a day? What, 7, 8, maybe 9 hours in some cases? And by that logic, are kids who are school age being raised by their teachers just because that's where they are all day? It doesn't make any sense. It's obviously flawed, and it's meant to make us feel guilty as mothers and women about choosing to work. And sometimes it's not a choice. Sometimes, for financial reasons, you need to work, and sometimes you want to. Whatever the case may be, it's totally valid if you have children and decide to put your kids in childcare of some sort. That can look like daycare, that can look like grandparents watching your kids, that can look like a nanny, a sitter, your partner staying home, whatever the case may be. If you're a mom, you don't have to stay home with your kids. If you want to, 100% valid choice. I would, however, make sure that you've got a really, really strong partnership. And I would recommend even some sort of like post-nup. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but when you are staying home and you are not bringing in any income, you are making yourself extremely vulnerable should something go wrong in your relationship with that child's other parent. More often than not, dad goes to work, he brings in money, mom stays home, she doesn't bring in any money. She does everything that has to do with homemaking, the cooking, the cleaning, the childcare, scheduling all the appointments, all of that kind of thing. And then they split up, and all of a sudden she has to start from scratch. She has this year-long or 2 or 3 or 4 or however many year-long gap on her resume that's kind of difficult to explain when you're looking for a new job. So, make it so that you're safe, that you're secure, so that no matter what happens, you're not screwed. And I know you don't get married or have a child with somebody if you think that something's going to go wrong, right? But you can't think that nothing will ever go wrong because you never know, and you need to protect yourself. So that will be the one thing I say for stay-at-home parents is just make sure that you get what you're owed, because you are also not contributing to any sort of retirement fund while you're staying home. You're losing out on income, savings, all that kind of stuff. And it's very easy to fall prey to financial abuse where you just don't have access to money, despite the fact that the other partner would not be able to, climb that corporate ladder and build their career if they didn't have somebody staying at home taking care of all of those things and watching their kids. We've all seen those breakdowns of what it would cost to hire somebody to cook for you, to take care of your children, to clean your house, to schedule all your appointments, that to drive your children around. You would need a chauffeur, a housekeeper, a nanny, a private chef, an executive assistant. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, yes, mom staying home saves dad a lot of money, or vice versa, obviously less common. But it's important that you're both on the same page, you and your partner, if you're the one that is staying home. Now, what I'll say about daycare is my daughter goes to daycare. She's in a home daycare, so it's a smaller than usual environment. There are 8 kids in her class total, including her. She started going to daycare part-time, mainly because I was not prepared to put her in full-time, so she did mornings only. She would be at daycare from about 8:30 until 11:45. I would usually pick her up after lunch before the kids at the daycare went down for her nap. And then I would bring her home and she would nap at home. That worked for us for a really long time because I was able to work really, really in the mornings while she was at daycare. And then in the afternoons, she would come home, go down for her nap, and I could usually get another hour and a half of work done while she was sleeping. Things got busy. Obviously, I own and operate 2 businesses now, and I also fill in on the radio frequently. So I'm a very, very busy lady, and I needed a little bit more support. And it didn't change the cost of the daycare because you pay for the full-time spot whether you're using it or not. So we decided to go full time. So now my daughter is there every day from 8:30 to 8:45 is drop off every morning, and then we usually pick her up around 2:45 every day. And it works for us. I get lots and lots of work done. I can sort of, put my head down and focus, and then I pick her up, and then I can just completely be present with her. And we have our afternoons together. I love it. We spend every day from 3 to 6 together. We can go to the park. We can paint. We can play in the backyard. We can play with bubbles. We can do all these activities. She loves to read, so we'll read together. We have 3 hours just one-on-one mommy-daughter time every single day. And that's what works for us. But not everybody has the flexibility that I have. Obviously, as a business owner, I get to set my own hours. I get to decide when I do or don't work. What that ends up looking like a lot of the time is working after she goes to bed for a little bit, to make sure that everything gets done. And for some parents, that looks like working 8 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever your hours are, if you've got non-traditional hours. Sometimes you don't really get to spend much time with your kids, but I don't think that means that somebody else is raising your child. You are the one who is raising your child. You are the person that they spend most of their time with. You are the one making the magic on the holidays. You are the one making them feel special on their birthdays. You are the one that's potty training them and spending weekends with them and vacations with them. And you're the one getting up in the middle of the night to comfort them after they have a bad dream. Your bed is the one that they're climbing into when they're scared. You're the one they want to snuggle with when they're sick. It's so easy to feel guilty about not being present all day long, but you know what? It's good for our kids to be around other kids. It's important for socialization. There are so many stay-at-home parents who join groups so that they can spend time with other parents and so that their children can spend time with other kids, because as human beings, we're social creatures. We need to be around other people, and it's so important for a child's development. And that's something they get at daycare. Not to mention being in that structured environment, having a schedule every day, having to listen to someone who's not your parents, having to solve conflict with your fellow preschool classmates in the daycare. These are all things that are going to prepare your child for school. Kids who go into kindergarten who came from daycare centers adjust much easier. Now, this, again, isn't to say if you choose to stay home with your kids, you're setting them up for failure. Absolutely not. They're getting that one-on-one time with you, and they'll only be little ones. I feel like I kind of got the best of both worlds because my daughter, when she was born, I live in Canada, and I was able to take a year of paid maternity leave. So I got to stay home with her and just focus on her 100% of the time, all day, every day, for a whole year, the first year of her life. And that was one of my most cherished times in my life. And I have to admit that when I went back to work, that was probably the hardest point in my motherhood journey. Everybody had warned me about how difficult it would be to have a newborn, how hard it would be to be sleep deprived and to be pumping or breastfeeding or bottle feeding, and how I'd be exhausted and how I wouldn't feel like myself. And all of those things were true, but nothing compared to how it felt going back to work. Especially when you have to leave your house, getting ready to leave the house every day, preparing your meals, getting your baby ready, leaving them suddenly after spending 24 hours a day with them. It was a really, really difficult transition for me. And it's a difficult transition for a lot of moms, especially if you're a mom in the US. You're lucky if you get 6 to 12 weeks of time off unpaid. Do you know how hard it is to go back to work after a C-section when you're pumping 6 weeks postpartum? No wonder we're always seeing videos of moms crying in bathroom stalls while they're pumping at work. And if that's something you want and it didn't bother you at all and you felt like a boss going back to work right away because mat leave wasn't for you, that's okay too. The ultimate thing here, the ultimate point that I'm trying to make is that moms should have the choice. They shouldn't be forced to go back to work because they can't afford to stay home even though they want to. And they shouldn't be forced to stay home because they can't afford childcare either. Now, the argument I keep getting into with people in the US about subsidizing daycare is, well, who's going to pay for it? Your tax dollars? Well, I don't want my tax dollars to go to that. I don't want my tax dollars to increase. Canadians actually don't pay all that much more than Americans do in taxes. I mean, our marginal tax rate, like the top bracket, I think is like a percentage or two lower than it is in the US. The difference is that instead of funding a bloated military and a fascist dictator, our money, our tax dollars, fund social programs like universal health care, like subsidized daycare, like parental leave. I pay just over $9 a day for my daughter to go to daycare, and the government pays the rest. Lo and behold, the province where I live, Quebec, in Canada, has had subsidized daycare since the 90s. We've been doing this for almost 30 years, and it works. We have one of the highest rates of women in the workforce in the entire world. Subsidize your daycare. Offer moms and dads parental leave, because even dads get paid time off here. 5 weeks of paternity leave, and then you have parental leave that you can split between mom and dad. You decide how many weeks each person takes. Make it easier to have kids. We keep complaining about the declining birth rate, but we make it impossible for parents to have children. The world is so expensive. Daycare is so expensive. If you want people to have kids, make it easy to make that choice. And don't shame them for using the childcare options that are available to them. It's just smart. If you liked what you heard today, make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends. If you enjoyed this solo episode, please let me know in the comments, because I can do more of these solo episodes if that's something that you'd be interested in. Until next time, I'm Robyn. Have a great one. If you like what you heard today, make sure you follow and subscribe to Rebel Mom Boss with Robyn Flynn wherever you get your podcasts. Oh, and make sure to leave a review, because that's how other moms will find the podcast too. Until next week.